All right, let's kick off this deep dive. And today we're looking at Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. We've got this really cool comparative analysis from the International Journal of Advanced Multidisciplinary Research and Studies. And it's going to help us kind of explore their journeys, how they became successful.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember right off the bat, this isn't about saying who is better. It's more about getting a deeper understanding of, the factors that shaped them.
Yeah.
And how their approaches to leadership and innovation were different.
Yeah, totally. And I think, everyone knows the names, right? Bill Gates, Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
But this analysis really digs into their backgrounds and the decisions they made. So let's start at the beginning with their early lives. Gates, he came from this pretty privileged background, really encouraged to be competitive from a young age. But Jobs, totally different story. He was adopted and got into tech through a more hands-on route, like almost a counterculture kind of thing.
It's a classic contrast, right? It almost like two sides of the same coin. And what's really interesting is that they both ended up dropping out of college. Gates from Harvard, Jobs from Reed, to pursue their tech dreams. So it makes you wonder, was that a sign of, just how driven they were, or was it just like a reflection of the times,
Yeah, I think it's got to be a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
But you can really see those different paths in their leadership styles. The study talks about Gates as this ingenious captain,
Yeah.
Super collaborative,
Yeah.
focused on building this powerhouse team at Microsoft. And then you've got Jobs, the visionary, but also super demanding, known for that give it up attitude, pushing everyone around him to get to like perfection.
And it goes deeper than just, demanding perfection. The source really highlights how Jobs believed that beautiful design, like truly elegant design, it actually made the technology work better. He wanted tech that was both gorgeous and easy to use so that even people who weren't tech savvy could use it. And you can see that design first approach in like all the devices we use today.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about it that way. So thinking about these two different styles, which one do you think is more effective, or is it just way more complicated than that?
It's definitely not that simple. I mean, think about Microsoft. They had this whole culture of bad news travels fast.
Right.
Which Gates put in place so people would learn from their mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? It points to this really open environment where people could collaborate. But then Jobs, with his almost like dictatorial style, he created some of the most iconic products ever. So I think there are good things about both approaches.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm curious about their entrepreneurial drive, their vision. It seems like Gates was always focused on building like a software empire from the very beginning. But Jobs, it seems like his path was a lot more adventurous, Apple then NXT then Pixar.
Yeah, you're right. Their paths were completely different, even though they both wanted to leave their mark. Jobs especially had this crazy journey. Remember when he got kicked out of Apple? And then he came back and like saved the company he started? It's insane.
It's such a good comeback story. So it seems like Gates was all about software being everywhere, like making sure everyone had access to Microsoft products. But Jobs, he was obsessed with the user experience, making tech beautiful and intuitive.
Totally. Their visions were so different, but they both revolutionized the tech industry in their own ways. But their stories also showed just how important it is to be able to adapt. Like, remember how Gates totally underestimated the power of the internet at first?
Wait, really? I always thought he was ahead of the curve.
Well, the analysis actually talks about how he saw the internet as this niche thing just for like hobbyists. And then Netscape came out with their browser and it just exploded. And that's when he realized the potential for distributing software online. He completely shifted Microsoft's strategy. And he even admitted that not understanding the internet was like one of his biggest mistakes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It just shows that even these brilliant minds, they have to adapt and learn from their mistakes. Like you were saying, adaptability is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and Jobs, he had his own pivots too. Like, remember the limitations of the iMac? He didn't just give up. He used those limitations to create the iPod. And that completely changed how we listen to music.
It makes you wonder, right? What if they hadn't adapted? Would we even have the same technology today?
That's a great question. It makes you think about all the external factors that were at play. It wasn't just about their brilliance, right? The rise of personal computers, the internet booming, the culture and the economy in the US, all of that played a role. It was like they were surfers catching the perfect wave.
I don't know about the surfing analogy. I mean, timing is important, but they were so driven and their vision was so strong. Don't you think they would have found a way to be successful in any era? Like, think about how Gates was so focused on software early on. That was visionary no matter what was happening with PCs.
Yeah, you've got a point there. It's kind of like that nature versus nurture debate, but for entrepreneurship. Would their talent have shown up in a different way if they were born in a different time? It's a question we can't really answer. But it's interesting to think about. But you're right, their drive to push boundaries definitely played a huge role in their success. They weren't just riding the wave, they were shaking it.
That's a great way to put it. So it seems like their leadership styles were really connected to the companies they built and the paths they took. Like Gates, with his focus on teams, he went straight for building that software empire.
Exactly.
And Jobs, with his obsession with perfection,
Yeah.
he created a company that was almost like an extension of himself.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into that a little bit more.
All right. So with Jobs, it wasn't just about the products themselves. It was like this whole ecosystem,
Yeah.
The hardware, the software, the services, all working together seamlessly. He wanted to control the entire experience. And you can actually see that throughout his career, even back when he was at NXT.
I never thought about it like that. It's like he built this walled garden, but people actually wanted to be inside because it was just so well designed, so
Yeah.
easy to use.
Exactly. And that control, that attention to detail, it was everywhere in the company. It's part of what made him such a tough boss, but it's also what led to those incredible innovations.
Okay, so we've talked about leadership styles and their visions, but we haven't really touched on their philanthropy, like Bill Gates with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, that's a really important part of their stories. And it shows another big difference between them. Gates has this really systematic approach to philanthropy, using data to figure out the best way to make a difference, focusing on big issues like global health and poverty.
And Jobs, well, he wasn't really known for that kind of traditional philanthropy. I mean, I'm sure he donated to causes, but it wasn't his main thing.
Yeah, that's true. But could you argue that his impact on the world through Apple was kind of like a form of philanthropy, like making technology more accessible, more intuitive,
Yeah.
ultimately giving people more power?
That's an interesting way to look at it. It's like two totally different philosophies of making a difference. Gates tackling these global issues directly, and Jobs trying to change the world through the tools he created.
Exactly. And it all speaks to the massive impact they both had, not just on tech, but on society as a whole. But with that level of success, there's always going to be criticism.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You don't get that powerful without ruffling some feathers.
Right. Like Gates, he was accused of creating a monopoly with Microsoft, which led to those huge antitrust investigations. Basically, some people felt like Microsoft was using its power to squash the competition, and the government had to step in to make things fair.
And with Jobs, well, everyone knew he was demanding. And sometimes he used some pretty ruthless tactics in business. There are all those stories about him yelling at employees and being super difficult to work with.
Yeah. The source even says that some people thought it was a good thing when he left Apple in 1985. They thought the company would become less harsh, more collaborative. But obviously that's not what happened.
It's interesting how those criticisms go back to their leadership styles. It seems like the same things that made them so successful, like Gates's ambition and Jobs' vision, also caused a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's a reminder that leadership is complicated. There's no one right way to do it. And sometimes what works in one situation can totally backfire in another. And trying to change the world sometimes means stepping on some toes along the way.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? Like, most of us aren't building the next tech empire.
I think the stories of Gates and Jobs, even with all their flaws, they teach us a lot about leadership innovation and that desire to make a difference in the world, even if our business is just our own life. There are still lessons to be learned.
I like that it's like a masterclass in entrepreneurship, even if our goals are totally different.
Yeah.
Speaking of masterclasses, let's talk about their legacies. I mean, their impact on tech and the world is undeniable.
Yeah. Gates, through his foundation, he's changed the way we think about global health and development. He's put billions of dollars towards fighting diseases and poverty. And his foundation has saved so many lives.
And Jobs? He basically reinvented how we use technology every day. Smartphones, tablets, how we watch movies and listen to music. It all goes back to him.
Their impact is so huge, it's almost hard to wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
They both shaped the future in their own ways. Not just the future of tech, but how we live and work and connect with each other.
It's amazing to think about their vision and the impact that just one person can have. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what's one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this, something they can apply to their own lives?
I think the biggest takeaway is that success isn't a straight line. It's about passion, resilience, taking risks, and being able to learn from your failures, actually using your failures to grow and adapt. You don't have to build a giant company to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe a little luck helps too, right?
Yeah.
But it's inspiring to think that two people can have such a huge impact on the world.
It shows what humans are capable of, the power of ideas. And it leaves us with this question. What kind of impact do you want to make? What's your contribution to the world? Even if it's just in your own little corner of it.
That's a perfect way to end this. We all have the potential to make a difference. And hopefully this deep dive has inspired you to think about what that difference could be.
Yeah, it really makes you think, about what we can accomplish.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, like, their legacies aren't just about the tech.
Yep.
You know, it's about how they changed the whole idea of what a tech leader is, for good and bad. Like, their influence is still everywhere.
It's kind of wild, right? They were so different, but they also had so much in common, like two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
Gates, the strategist, building this massive software company, and then focusing on solving these huge global problems. And Jobs, the artist, obsessed with making tech beautiful and easy to use, changing the way we interact with technology like every single day. And their stories have so much to teach us, no matter what field you're in. The importance of having a vision, being resilient, adapting, and that drive to keep pushing the limits. They also remind us that success isn't this straight line. It's messy, it's full of challenges and wins and everything in between.
And yeah, they made mistakes. Even brilliant people make mistakes. But what sets them apart is how they learn from those mistakes and change direction. That's a big lesson for all of us. We all have setbacks, but it's about using them to move forward.
Exactly. So thinking about their legacies, it makes you wonder what kind of impact you want to have, right? It doesn't have to be on a global scale. It could be in your community, your work, your family.
Yeah, what will people remember you for? It's a good question to think about. And hopefully this deep dive has given you some things to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this journey, exploring the lives of these two tech giants. And until next time, keep diving deep.